What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about another horror film. And obviously, we're in October. I've been reviewing mostly horror films outside of my rewatch of the Toy Story franchise, which was fun to kind of cut in there. But I've been reviewing virtually just horror films for the month of October. And today I'm going to be talking about a Shudder original film. And I love Shudder, and I've reviewed a lot of their movies this year, and I've been a little bit less than impressed with a lot of the movies that they've put out this year. I feel like the quality hasn't been all that great. Outside of a couple films that I enjoy, I've been mostly left feeling disappointed after watching their films. And the movie I'm going to be talking about today, I'm actually very excited to discuss because it's from a director, Brandon Christensen, who has actually directed three other films for Shudder that I've watched all of them. He's directed the film Superhost, Z, and Stillborn, and I've actually liked all three of those movies. I think Brandon is a talented director who works very well in the horror genre, combining like familial trauma with horror elements. Superhost kind of leaned more into the comedy territory, like dark comedy territory. The movie was very violent, but it had a lot more humorous moments, and I've really enjoyed all his films, Z probably being my favorite. And so I was really excited to hear Brandon had another film coming out, and the premise to this sounded absolutely fascinating. I was really excited to watch the movie. The film I'm going to be talking about today is The Puppetman. The Puppetman is directed by Brandon Christensen. The Puppetman, a convicted killer on death row, always maintained his innocence and that it was an evil force controlling his body as he slaughtered his victims. Now Michal, the killer's daughter, begins to suspect that there may be some truth to her father's claim when those around her begin to die in brutal ways. She must try and break the curse of the Puppet Man before all her loved ones are killed. So, as I said, very excited to go into this movie because I'm a big fan of Brandon's work. I think he's a very talented director that does really well in the horror genre. And unfortunately, this is probably my least favorite project Brandon has made so far. I'll break it down a little bit more when I get into a little bit more detail about the film. So The Puppet Man introduces us to our lead character, Michal, who at the beginning of the film, she's living on a college campus. She's spending a lot of time with her friends, and we get a flashback sequence to her father's character killing her mother. And it seems like he completely loses control of all of his bodily functions, picks up a knife. You can see the horror and the expression in his face while he's committing the murder. Then it jumps back to her at college. We get introduced to her friend group, the people that she's spending time with. And she's constantly getting these visions throughout the film, and she's appearing to sleepwalk every single night and making these weird symbols on the walls, doing all of these weird things, and her roommate is like filming her, but also kind of making sure that she's doing okay. Well, shortly after that, her friends start to slowly lose control of their bodies and get killed off one by one. And so she is trying to figure out through the film what is controlling these people, what is the entity that is controlling them, how did it affect her family, how did it affect her father, did her father actually commit these murders, is it like a greater entity? And so it's the mystery surrounding whatever this is that is causing people to lose control of their bodily functions and commit these murders. What I will say about this movie is I think the premise is absolutely fascinating. I love stuff like this. I think it's super interesting to tie in the true crime type of thing with supernatural horror elements. So like having a string of murders, but having it be tied into something a little bit more supernatural. It always makes for an interesting horror film because it keeps you guessing as a viewer. You're constantly wondering, okay, what kind of twists and turns is this movie gonna make? And I think Brandon has really great framework here, similar to all the other films that he's made in the past, where he's done a really great job building framework and kind of setting the stage. The problem with this film, comparatively to the rest of the films in his filmography, is I think this film suffers from poor pacing issues. We get introduced to the characters at the beginning of the film. We get all that information as to what's going on with her father, what's going on with her, slowly being introduced to the issues that she's dealing with, but then we get these set of scenes that just feel repetitive and recycled every single moment on screen, where it's just a group of people talking about the same thing over and over again that's not really adding new information information into the story. It's not really pushing this thing along. Can't help but watch it and think, okay, what would this movie be if you cut 10 to 15 minutes off of it, if not 20 minutes? And to me, it would probably be the same thing. It wouldn't really be missing a whole lot. I will say this film is incredibly well shot, similarly to most of Brandon's films. He does a really fantastic job with his cinematographer at creating a great environment. I really like how bleak and gross this movie looks. It feels just very somber from the very first frame, and I think diving you into that world and kind of creating that atmosphere, he does a very good job with it. I think the actors all, for the most part, do a very good job with the material that they're given. They have the sequence at the beginning of the movie where like they have to go buy alcohol at the beginning, and one of them is like using a fake ID, but all of them look like they're 30, which is like, that one's kind of hard for me, where I'm like, they don't really look all that young, so that kind of pulled me out of it a little bit as well, as far as their age group is concerned. And there are some really great kill sequences in this. The effects in this movie are really well done. I really liked, there's a scene where someone is essentially burning alive. There's like a scene where someone's face gets like ripped in half. There's a lot of really cool sequences in the movie visually, and I liked those moments, but they're few and far between. And then when the actual information gets dumped on us as to what's going on and we kind of start to get into the third act, it really just falls into cliche after cliche, to where I feel like even the ending was like, okay, I've seen this before. It's not anything new. It didn't really surprise me. And I think because so much of the film spends its time meandering with bland conversation that doesn't really get you anywhere, that having a third act that, despite how action-packed it gets in moments, that just becomes very cliche and doesn't really provide anything new to its audience, it's really unfortunate. I just kept wanting more out of this movie, and it's not to say that I think this is the worst thing in the world you could watch, because it's not. I think Brandon is a talented director, and I think he showcases that in this film at the things that he's really good at, which is creating great atmosphere, building up good characters. I just think that in the screenplay in this movie and just how it's paced and structured, I wasn't as immersed in this as I was like a Z, where I feel like every moment in that movie is utilized to the best of its ability to create a very horrifying atmosphere and to really get a lot out of you as an audience member. And this movie just didn't do that for me as much as his other films. And I think there's a lot worse that you could watch around this time of year. I just think Brandon has better films in his filmography than this movie. So have you seen The Puppetman? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I wasn't the biggest fan of this movie. I feel like it has a lot of problems, and despite the good that this movie has, some great cinematography and atmosphere, I feel like the bad outweighs the good in this scenario, to where I would choose to watch something else in Brandon's catalog over this movie. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.